150 miles of tunnels. That's what American forces uncovered beneath the red clay northwest of Saigon. Some passages ran 30 feet below the surface. Others stretched for kilometers, connecting entire Viet Cong villages underground. And somewhere in that darkness, right now, at this very second, there's a man crawling forward on his elbows with a .45 caliber pistol in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He's 5'7", maybe 140 pounds, soaking wet. The tunnel around him is 2.5 feet high. He can't stand, can't turn around, can't lift his head without scraping scalp against hard-packed clay. The air smells like cordite and human waste and something else he can't identify. His flashlight beam reaches maybe 6 feet ahead before the darkness eats it. Somewhere in front of him, the Viet Cong are waiting. They built this place. They know every turn, every trap, every dead end. He's crawling into their home. And if he meets them down here, in a space so tight his pistol barely has room to recoil, one of them isn't crawling back out. They called them tunnel rats. And what they did, alone in the dark beneath Vietnam, was something the US Army never trained anyone for. Something that couldn't be trained for. You either went down or you didn't. The Cu Chi tunnel network wasn't one tunnel. It was an entire underground city built over 2 decades, starting when the Viet Minh fought the French in the 1940s. By 1966, when the 25th Infantry Division set up camp directly on top of it northwest of Saigon, the system had grown into something no American intelligence officer believed possible. Command centers, hospitals, weapons factories, living quarters for hundreds of fighters, trapdoors hidden beneath leaves that dropped straight down into the earth, ventilation shafts disguised as termite mounds, connecting passages between tunnel complexes 3 miles apart. The Viet Cong could disappear after an ambush and reappear 5 kilometers away without ever breaking the surface. And the Americans had no idea it was there until their base started getting shelled from inside the perimeter. The first tunnel entrance was found by accident. A soldier on patrol stepped on what he thought was solid ground. The earth gave way beneath his boot. He looked down into a black shaft descending straight into nothing. Engineers were called in. They dropped CS gas grenades down the hole and waited for someone to come coughing out the other side. No one did. The gas just disappeared into the earth like the tunnel was breathing it in. That's when someone had to make a decision. They could blow the entrance and move on, or someone could go down there and see what was inside. Staff Sergeant Robert Baer lowered himself feet first into the shaft outside Bencat village on June 14, 1967. He had a flashlight, a Colt 45, and a length of communication wire tied to his belt so the men on the surface could pull him out if he tugged twice. The hole was 3 feet across. The tunnel at the bottom was smaller. Baer was a thin man, 5'6", and he barely fit. He crawled forward on his stomach, pushing the flashlight ahead of him, the pistol in his other hand. 20 feet in, the tunnel dropped straight down again. Another shaft. No ladder, no handholds. Just darkness and the sound of his own breathing inside a clay tube that felt like it was swallowing him alive. He kept going. The tunnel leveled out, widened slightly, and then his flashlight caught something ahead. A wire, stretched across the passage at neck height. Baer froze. He couldn't back up, couldn't turn around. He reached forward slowly and traced the wire to a grenade pinned to the tunnel wall. Chinese stick grenade. The pin was still in, but the wire was rigged so that anyone crawling forward would catch it with their head or shoulder and pull the pin without ever seeing it. Baer cut the wire with his knife, took the grenade, kept crawling. 30 feet later, he found another one, then another. And then he reached a junction where 3 tunnels met, and sitting in the center of that junction was a Viet Cong soldier with an AK-47 across his lap. They saw each other at the same time. Baer's flashlight hit the man's face. The man's eyes went wide. Baer fired. 1 shot. The sound in that confined space was so loud it felt like the tunnel was collapsing. The bullet hit the Viet Cong soldier in the chest. He fell backward into one of the side passages. Baer couldn't tell if he was dead. Couldn't see past the first few feet of the side tunnel. He kept the flashlight on that opening and crawled backward, slowly, waiting for return fire that never came. It took him 20 minutes to back out the way he came in. When he reached the surface, his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold the flashlight anymore. The officers wanted to know what was down there. Baer told them. They asked if he could draw a map. He said no. You couldn't map it from memory. It didn't move in straight lines. The only way to know what was in the tunnels was to go into the tunnels, and that required a certain kind of man. Not the biggest, not the strongest. The 25th Infantry tried sending engineers down first. Trained demolition men who knew how to handle explosives in confined spaces. Most of them took one look into the shaft and said no. The ones who went down came back up white-faced and refused to go again. There was something about the tunnels that didn't respond to training or discipline or orders. It was psychological, primal. You were crawling into a space that wanted to kill you, built by an enemy who knew you were coming, in darkness so total that your flashlight felt like it was making you a target instead of helping you see. You couldn't fight that with training. You either had it in you to go down, or you didn't. The men who could do it were usually small, wiry, the kind of soldiers who got picked last for football and first for anything that required squeezing into tight spaces. They were infantrymen mostly, volunteers always. No one was ever ordered into the tunnels. The mission was simple. Go down, map what you find, look for documents or weapons, and come back alive. The equipment was even simpler. A .45 pistol, a flashlight, sometimes a knife. That was it. No rifle. A rifle was useless in a tunnel 2 feet wide. No radio. Radio signals didn't penetrate 30 feet of clay. No backup. If you got into trouble down there, you were alone. The Viet Cong knew the tunnel rats were coming. They prepared. Punji stakes angled upward in narrow passages, designed to impale a man crawling forward in the dark. Scorpions and snakes released into side chambers. Flooded sections that required swimming underwater with a flashlight between your teeth. False tunnels that dead-ended at collapsed walls, trapping anyone who crawled in. And fighters. VC soldiers who lived in those tunnels, who knew every inch, who could move through the dark without a light and wait in silence for the American to crawl past. The tunnel rats learned to listen for breathing, learned to smell the difference between stale air and air someone had just exhaled into, learned to move without their equipment rattling because sound carried in the tunnels like nowhere else. Sergeant Harold Risher, 25th Infantry Division, was killed in a tunnel complex near Soi Cut in August 1967. He had gone down alone to clear a passage that engineers wanted to demolish. The tunnel was trapped. A grenade rigged to a tripwire that Risher didn't see in time. The explosion collapsed part of the tunnel. The men on the surface tried to dig down to him. It took them 4 hours. By the time they reached him, he was gone. They pulled his body out in pieces. Specialist Thomas Gutierrez died when an American grenade was dropped down a tunnel opening while he was still inside. The man on the surface didn't know he was down there. No radio, no communication. Just the sound of the grenade hitting dirt, and then nothing. They found Gutierrez 3 days later when another tunnel rat went down to map the complex. He was still holding his flashlight. There were others. Men whose names never made it into official reports because tunnel rat wasn't an official designation. It wasn't a military occupational specialty. It wasn't a unit. It was just something certain men did when the situation required it. And the Army never kept centralized records of who went down or how many didn't come back up. The estimates vary. Some say dozens were killed in the tunnels. Some say more. No one knows for certain, but the work continued because the tunnels kept appearing. Every week, another entrance found. At Arsene, another complex discovered. The Viet Cong used them to stage ambushes, store weapons, treat their wounded, plan operations. As long as the tunnels existed, American forces in the Cu Chi area were vulnerable. Mines appeared overnight, planted from below. Mortar teams emerged from trapdoors, fired, and vanished back underground before counter-battery fire could touch them. Supply caches materialized in cleared areas that had been swept just days before. The underground network was alive, constantly shifting, constantly adapting, and the only way to stop it was to go into the tunnels and destroy them from the inside. Map them, clear them, collapse them, one at a time. And that meant tunnel rats. They developed techniques. A second man would wait at the entrance with a rope tied to the first man's ankle, ready to pull him out if he tugged the signal. Flashlights were held away from the body, arm extended, so that if someone fired at the light, they might miss the man holding it. Pistols were carried chamber empty until the last possible moment, because an accidental discharge in a tunnel could bring the whole thing down on your head. Some men learned to navigate short distances in total darkness, flashlight off, listening for the sound of air moving through passages ahead. Others marked their path with chalk or string so they could find their way back. They learned to read the tunnels by feel. A sudden drop in temperature meant a larger chamber ahead. A change in air pressure meant a connecting passage or a vent shaft. The smell of cooking or human waste meant recent occupation. Every detail mattered when you were crawling blind into an enemy stronghold built specifically to kill you. The Viet Cong adapted. They dug the tunnels narrower, built them in multiple levels so that clearing one layer didn't mean you'd found everything. They stationed soldiers in chambers off the main passage, waiting in silence for the tunnel rat to crawl past, then attacking from behind. They flooded tunnels with water, forcing the Americans to choose between turning back or swimming blind through submerged passages with no idea what was on the other side. Some tunnel rats carried plastic bags to breathe from if a tunnel filled with CS gas. Others just held their breath and kept going. A tunnel rat from the 1st Infantry Division, whose name was never recorded, spent 11 hours lost in a complex near Pu Mai Hung. He had gone down to map a junction and taken a wrong turn in the dark. His flashlight died. He crawled in blackness for hours, feeling his way along the walls, trying to find air currents that might lead to an exit. He crawled over the body of a dead VC soldier, crawled through water that soaked his uniform and made him think he was drowning. When he finally found a shaft leading up, he didn't know if it was the one he'd entered through or a different exit miles away. He climbed out into daylight and found himself half a kilometer from where he'd started. He'd been moving in circles beneath the earth while his unit searched for him on the surface. He never went down again, but others did. Because the mission didn't stop. The 25th Infantry and the 1st Infantry and the Australian forces operating in the area all needed men willing to go into the dark. And there were always a few. The small, thin, wiry soldiers who could fit into spaces no one else could reach. The ones who didn't freeze when the tunnel walls pressed in on both sides and the air got so thin you had to breathe slow to make it last. The ones who could crawl forward into blackness with nothing but a pistol and a light in the knowledge that if they met the enemy down there, only one of them was coming back. By 1969, the tunnel networks around Cu Chi had been largely destroyed. Not by bombs. Bombs didn't work on tunnels 30 feet deep. The B-52s could crater the surface, but the tunnels remained. The only thing that worked was men going down with satchel charges and demolition cord, rigging the supports and collapsing the tunnels from the inside. Dangerous work. Slow work. Work that couldn't be done by engineers standing on the surface. It required tunnel rats. And they did it. One tunnel at a time. One crawl at a time. The Viet Cong stopped using Cu Chi as a major base area. They moved deeper into Cambodia. The tunnels fell silent. Some were left intact, preserved, and decades later they became tourist attractions where visitors could crawl through widened, reinforced sections and imagine what it must have been like. But the sections tourists see are nothing like the real thing. The real tunnels were smaller, darker, built to kill anyone who entered them. And the men who went down into those tunnels, in the dark, in the war, did it knowing that every breath might be their last. They were never issued medals for it. Most of them never talked about it. But every fire base that didn't get hit from below, every bunker that didn't collapse into a shaft, every convoy that rolled past Cu Chi without triggering a mine planted from underneath, that was them. The men who went into the dark with nothing but a pistol and a light. The men the Viet Cong feared more than the bombs.